There's nothing. That's it. So got new sound equipment.
Do you want me to look in the camera?
Yeah, just look in the camera. Got new sound equipment. So I'm trying to get it to work.
Yeah.
I'm investing, but I'm not good with technology because some of the people are complaining about not being great sound. But I'm doing my best. Hopefully it's going to work. If not, see what happens. So this is the 6th episode of the podcast.
Will you be on this yourself then?
Yeah, so it's got both of us.
Yeah.
Do you want to see what it looks like?
No, it's okay.
The broadcast, as Jeffrey Dudgeon called it. The title is Irish and British.
Yes.
Just reflecting sort of my take on life, and we're sort of sitting down and chatting with people who share that sort of outlook. Though Jeffrey Dudgeon said, "Yeah, I'm not Irish at all."
Mm-hmm.
He said he was just British, which I didn't realise. But you definitely would consider yourself Irish, yeah.
No problem.
But you're a loyalist.
Yeah.
So loyalist and Irish.
And unionist and European as
Yeah,
well.
yeah.
You know, all those.
Yeah.
Those facets.
And was it
Have we started yet?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
It's very. I know. Sorry. It's very.
Maybe if I give you a bit of my background,
Yeah.
and just my identity. I was born what I would call slipper distance from here.
Sandy Row.
Bedroom slippers, yeah. And it's interesting because it was a totally Protestant area, and unionist, loyalist, Orange Order, and from I think about 5-year-old I first joined the Orange Order, so that gave me an identity. And interesting enough, I had a number of uncles, and one of them had married a Catholic and was ostracised.
Yeah.
And moved over the Boyne Bridge, which is about half a mile from us. And
That's up towards Balls in the Falls.
Yeah, near the lower falls, just over the bridge, Durham Street.
Oh yeah.
The police station is there. And so I had cousins that I had never met.
Yeah.
Because in those days, the boys were brought up Protestants, and the girls were brought up Catholics. And
was that the unspoken rule then?
I think it was something to do with the Catholic Church that they wouldn't baptise the children unless they were all Catholic. I think it may be totally wrong, but it was something to do with the Catholic Church. But it tended to be that the boys were brought up Protestants and girls were brought up Catholics. And those days that I went over Durham Street, or sometimes I went up to the hospital, visit up the Royal on the Grand Road. So I'd have passed near enough my uncle's house, my cousin's house, and as of my father never spoke to him, even when my uncle died, wouldn't go to the funeral, and I certainly didn't go to the funeral. But interesting, the boys came and they stayed in our house, and one of the boys was called Thomas Douglas, and my memories of him was he was a brilliant swimmer. He had webbed feet,
Right.
like a duck. That's my memories of him. Brilliant swimmer. He was just swimming around on the bath.
Oh yeah.
And in I think it was 1993, I went to the United States International Visitor Program. It was all over the States, an amazing visit. And the first week that I was there, I got a phone call from my wife to say that my cousin Thomas had been shot dead by the INLA. He worked in the Northern Ireland Electricity Service. Him and his wife were going to work at 5 to 7 in the morning. Car sitting there, guy got out with a gun and shot him dead. And because his name is Tommy, people call him Tommy. When I was in the States, people ringing up my wife, they thought they said Sammy, I thought it was me.
Sammy, Tommy.
But even so, it was my cousin and I couldn't get home for the funeral.
Yeah.
It was sad. And those sorts of experiences make you bitter, angry. I suppose growing up in Sandy Row, one time there was a bomb went off and I went down, and Sandy Row, the IRA left a pram bomb outside a pub.
Yeah.
And I went down.
What's this, in like early 70s?
Yeah. And I went down to help people. I was helping people who had been badly injured.
Yeah.
I think a couple maybe killed. And the ambulance arrived, and they were bringing this young woman out. I remember it as well. And she had a white top on, and it was saturated with blood. It's my sister.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
I,
shit, yeah, yeah.
first time in life, I wanted to, first time in life I nearly fainted,
Yeah.
but I didn't. And secondly, and I was gripped by anger. I wanted to kill
Mm-hmm.
the people who did that. And at that time I was in a relationship with a girl, and I think the best thing happened to me was that we went to just to chill out after this happened.
How did you
Because
chill out in the
I would
70s? There's no Starbucks as back then.
yeah, went to chill out. So went to Derby, and looking back, went to Derby for a couple of
Oh,
months.
to England?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, just because you knew you had
Get
to-
away, because
Wow.
I had murder in my heart. I
Wow.
went, and part of the conflict here was tit for tat. They
Yeah.
did us,
Yeah,
to us,
yeah,
we did
yeah.
it to you. But looking back, I mean, I was standing in that street, and I was an angry young man.
Mhm.
But the people who bombed that pub were angry young men. The policemen were angry young men.
Yeah, yeah.
The soldiers were angry. Is it any wonder there was such chaos at the time and such mayhem,
Yeah.
and you had all that anger
Yeah.
on the back?
But just out of interest, while you're saying, when you talk about Sandy Road, just changing it a little bit, because I always say I grew up in a very orange corridor. I grew up in Stranmillis,
Yeah.
quite mixed. But if it wasn't Stranmillis, I was either in Bangor or Carrickfergus on my Saturdays, and then on holidays I was up in Bushmills.
Yeah.
And then if it was like a bank holiday, my mum would always take us down to Sandy Road,
Yeah, yeah.
and there was like a wee diner.
Yeah, yeah.
And the reason why she took us there was, I think that was sort of like her second community, because her
Mhm.
father, my grandpa owned a pet shop.
Mm-hmm.
Just you know the building backed onto Sandy Road, so it was on Great Victoria Street.
Yes.
You know where the scooter shop is, where it
Yes.
used to be.
Yeah, yeah.
Just there, I think, is where it
Yeah.
was. You wouldn't remember that? Remember that shop, no?
I don't. But I certainly remember in the 70s that area where there was one wee carry out place, and there was Lavery's Bar, and that was it.
Yeah.
It closed down at night. And living in that environment, it was scary, because you actually went round to get chips, whatever, and there were drive-by shootings, and
Yeah.
I witnessed a couple of those myself. And then when I suppose as an angry young man, part of it was that when I was 17, but 17, 18,
Is it what just so people know, is this early 70s, mid 60s?
early 70s, early
Okay.
70s,
Yeah.
early to mid 70s, and but 1973, 74, I think it was, the IRA tried to murder me,
Right.
and two friends.
Is that after you come back from Derby?
I'm trying to think. That would have been before I went to Dublin.
Okay.
And with a Thompson submachine gun.
Holy moly.
And the police told me at the after that the reason why I wasn't hit was the Thompson submachine gun is a very inaccurate weapon,
Okay, yeah.
unless it's you're going into a bar to shoot.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
they were firing from a house,
Whoa.
and I was in shock.
Yeah.
I was traumatized.
Like where the bullets like
The bullets bounced off the wall. Bounced.
holy.
Um,
If that had been an Armalite, it'd be a different story.
Oh, aye. And I remember lying on the ground, closing my eyes, and thinking, if I close my eyes, they'll not see me. I couldn't see them. I
Yeah,
couldn't see
yeah.
for some reason. And then I heard this thud, and I thought, they have an Armalite or
Yeah.
303 rifle or whatever. And I heard the thud, and I thought, these guys are shooting me. And I eventually opened my eyes. There was a soldier lying beside me, shooting back up at this window
Whoa.
with his SLR,
Yeah.
rifle. And I went back to I went back to Sandy Road, and I was in shock. I couldn't speak,
Yeah.
and my mother got me to sit down, and I couldn't speak to her for maybe an hour or so. And when I finally came around, I told her, and she says, "Hold on a minute." And she went out to the wee kitchen, the wee scullery we called it,
Yeah, yeah.
and she brought in a big mug, a blue and white mug of tea, and she said, "Take that. That'll calm your nerves." It was a mug of tea with 2 sugars.
Yeah.
And looking back, if you think of all the organisations and all the support there is for victims,
Yeah.
my support was
Yeah.
a mug of tea with 2 sugars.
Yeah, yeah. Changed times.
Yeah.
But what was it like? You know, I can't remember what my mum would have been working there. There's always a funny story because she was from Stranmillis. She always talks about she went there and my grandpa goes, "Dad, there's a lady looking at a map. Where on earth? We don't sell maps, do you?" And my grandfather goes, You know, she was the well-to-do girl from Stranmillis, so that was always the story. So it was a weird one for me. So I feel like I have a bit of a affinity there, obviously doing the boxing. But you know, I'd often walk from here to Sandy Row, and you know, it's sad at the moment. You know, there's a lot of dilapidated shops just by the hostel. There was some on the main Sandy Row itself have been sort of like Polish shops or whatnot, which is good to see because they're doing good business. But in the 60s, was it not a completely different world? Was it not a bustling community? Not that it's not now, but like in terms of numbers and the shops.
It was, and you'd have got people come all over Northern Ireland to shops like Reed Shoe Shop.
Yeah, I went there as a child. That's where we went. It was sort of an institution.
It was, the Reed Shoe Shop was at the junction of Sandy Row and City Street. Yeah. I lived in City Street.
Right.
I just lived right in the middle of Sandy Row there. But it's interesting because I remember people talking about this British ascendancy we had, that we were much better off than Catholics. And there's no doubt about it, there was poverty, disadvantage and long-term unemployment in Catholic national service, without a doubt. But looking back, my father worked in a shipyard, but at times he was laid off and he maybe had to go to Scotland as an example. But I remember a report was carried out in, I think it was 1974, and it said our housing in Sandy Row, which was literally a terraced house, 7 of us in 2 bedrooms, outside toilet. That's the environment I grew up in. And I was happy, mostly happy looking back. Though I suppose you look back with rose tinted glasses. But this report said that the housing in Sandy Row was some of the worst housing conditions in Europe. And I thought to myself, that's some ascendancy we have, you know, because there's no doubt about it that the unionist government at the time were the lords and ladies of society. Of course, and I remember going round on a big lorry, and it was the unionist guy was up for the Westminster, I think it was, but it was the only time you'd have seen that. Of course, to be quite honest. And I remember waving that Union Jack flag, and I was only about maybe 8 or 9, and somebody told me to shout, and I was shouting this from the back of this lorry. If you vote for so and so, you'll get bigger holes in your gravy rings. The gravy rings, donuts. So I was shouting this. Someone's obviously winding me up, and I thought this was a message for everybody. Looking back, a bit embarrassing.
But so that's you know, the story about your cousins. So you wouldn't have had any. Like for me, I grew up semi-detached, it was a Protestant household. Technically, both my parents were born and baptised Church of Ireland, but my mum went to Presbyterian, switched Presbyterian to a better youth club when she was a teenager. So I was brought up Presbyterian. The next door neighbours were Catholic, and it was never an issue. We just played happily. That was my experience. But so you wouldn't have had any. This is when I was like 3, 4. But you wouldn't have had any experience of you know, cross community, you know, as a child then.
None whatsoever. In fact, the only Catholic I ever remember meeting up until I was about 15. Well, there were 2 Catholics. The first one was a woman who lived in the Ormer Road, and she was a fortune teller. And she used to come and she used to read my mother's cup with a cup of tea. And she was as my mother should have said. The noise didn't come out. And that's the way the people would have talked. But I'll tell you another story. For me, this epitomises the troubles and the tragedy, even Northern Ireland today, that we're still divided, still all the sectarian, it's still there, it's bubbling underneath. But when I was about 11, my friend and I were down Gravy Toy Street, and we met 2 girls, and my first girlfriend, and my girlfriend for about 3 to 4 weeks. There was a place called the Lido Cafe, and you did coffee and orange and stuff.
Where would that be now?
It was directly facing Europe Hotel.
Oh right, okay.
It was at the Lido Cafe. But anybody from that area would certainly remember. So we used to go in there, and then remember as well this girl you called her Mary, and she was a Catholic. And I think what attracted to me was that she was a good looking girl, she was a lovely looking girl, but also because she was a Catholic. I had no idea what Catholics were like. Well, I had this vision in my head, which I brought up in Sandy Row. But the thing is this, is that after about 4 weeks, she didn't turn up. Okay. I never saw her again. And I met her friend about a month later. Again, walking down Great Victoria, and I ran across, and I said, "What happened to Mary?" I said, "I thought we were getting on well." And she said, "Look, I'm a bit embarrassed to tell you this," she said, "but she found out, Mary found out that I was her cousin. Not her long distant cousin. This was one of my cousins over across the bridge in Durham Street." And I thought to myself, you know, it's a tragedy of Northern Ireland in a sense. There's me meeting a girl and she's my full cousin.
That's a world removed from me, where we share a lot of similarities. Totally different. Like, I think my cousins were nominally Catholic or baptized or whatever, and we just knew that, but it didn't change anything. But you know, doing this project is about trying to show unionist-minded people who have a multi-layered identity, just to understand who they are and to break down that caricature. So I'm mindful to say, because as someone who's pretty liberal, I always try to. I don't like the way I would see this when you're chatting with people. It seems to be like I think there was a play, and it was basically encapsulating your conundrum when it was like the big bad orange man father who went mad because his son married a Catholic. It's always presented as though the bigotry of the Protestants, which sort of endures to this day. But you know, I would read Conor Cruise O'Brien, I would read Sean O'Phelan, and they would have talked about, Conor Cruise O'Brien would talk about when he grew up in, I guess, the 30s in Dublin, and he had a Protestant friend or something, and the father died, so then the mother wasn't sure about bringing him out of school or whatnot, and the whole talk in the community was that the child was going to go to hell if she didn't do that, and so it would. So you know what I'm saying? Just that there's a enduring sort of idea that, you know, that sort of horrible bigotry is unique to the Protestant Unionist community, but it's I don't think that's right to say, because
if like me, if you lived in Sandro during the Troubles, you realise that there was sectarianism, there was bitterness, there was hatred in the Protestant community. Likewise across the bridge, because it was foisted upon us in terms of violence. I had a number of friends who were killed. Told you some of my family were killed. Also had 2 brothers who ended up in prison as well as a result of the conflict. So I grew up in that loyalist identity, that orange identity, and it's innocent because I never any Irish identity whatsoever, none whatsoever. And same with rugby, I would never have thought about supporting Ireland in the rugby. And when I went to Derby, as I said earlier on, Brian, one of the things I found was that in Derby was quite a big Irish community, and I lived in the girl I was going with, her father ran a pub. He wasn't a landlord, but he managed the pub, and we stayed there. And 99% of the people were from Ireland, north and south. And so for the first time in my life, it was 1974, around 74, first time in my life, after coming out of Belfast, and you know, if you think of 72, the numbers of people murdered, 72, 74, even though it was only for a couple of months, I met people from Crossmaglen, South Armagh, people from Dublin, people from Cork, and on a Sunday night there was a big chapel across the way, right in the centre of Derby. And on a Sunday night this guy who managed this pub had an Irish night on, so it was Irish music, and for me Irish music is all diddly dee stuff and all that as well. And see when the mass got out at 8 o'clock, it was a very busy road. They were darting out of cars to get the best seats, and they come in. And one of the things I found was that I discovered an Irish identity I never had.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm proudly Irish. I remember talking to Ian Paisley
Yeah.
one time. Said to him, and he had an Irish identity.
Yeah.
But without I'm as Irish as Jerry Adams or whatever. Anyway, but also I discovered a joy for Irish music, Irish traditional music.
Yeah.
So I love Irish traditional music, and so for me, I'm that mixed identity you talk of. I'm an Ulster man, proud Ulster man. I'm proud to be British. I'm proud to be Irish, but I'm also European as well. And how I got a European identity was, I suppose, after the ceasefires here. We set up the Belfast European Partnership Board to fund peace projects right across Belfast, and I got involved and met people in Europe. So for a number of years I had contact in Europe with a number of cities, and I love Europe. So I have a European identity. I voted to remain
Same.
as a member of the Democratic Unionist Party. I'm still a member of the Democratic Unionist Party, and I voted to remain. And I suppose next couple of months is going to show us exactly where we're going or where we're not going, and I despair that we're coming out of Europe, to be quite honest.
Yeah. Okay. In this podcast, we'll try not to talk about Europe and Brexit, but but it was very interesting observations. What about you just mentioned that there's still a lot of bigotry and sectarianism in Northern Ireland. And I'll just sort of preface it by sort of saying, I suppose I'm like, this is the first time I've used this term, but like the sort of cathedral quarter, Belfast person, Northern Irish person, like a Bill Woolsey, protege or whatever the word is, where Bill Woolsey and what do you call the fella that owns the Duke of York, Jim?
No, I know you now.
Another sort of magnate or titan of. You've got the titans of industry. These are like the titans of culture in a way. And it's obviously different. It's a different type of culture, but nightlife culture. So it's a very sort of cosmopolitan, metropolitan Belfast. You go out on a Saturday night, no one's wearing any football tops or rugby tops. You could be in London, you could be in Liverpool, you could be in New York and Brooklyn, and but I'm starting to see that was the world I grew up in, especially sort of coming of age, 2003-4. You were around there when you were creating this Northern Ireland. Like I read somewhere that Tony, I think the Odyssey Arena, which is another sort of exemplar of this metropolitan, cosmopolitan culture. And I think that was a wee deal that sort of Tony Blair said he'd throw in, sweeten the deal for the unionists, maybe. So that was my whole coming of age, going to the Odyssey Arena, and then going to the Cathedral Quarter when I was 18, 19, 20. I just saw Northern Ireland as a place of good potential. Yeah, there was that sort of community difference and going up with Catholic neighbours, but there was, and I had great faith in the Good Friday Agreement and this whole parity of esteem, respect. But maybe now I've got a wee bit older, I'm starting to see is a veneer, and you sort of suggested earlier that maybe there's a bit of still the old tribal mentality there.
Absolutely, no doubt about that. I'll give an example of that. Is that if you think nobody actually knows how many people died during the conflict. But it's way over 3,000. Around 40,000 people injured.
Any more coffee?
Yes, please. But Brian, there's still a lot of those people about. There's people like me have lots of hard memories, difficult memories, and I'm the first to admit there are times I feel sectarian. But the one thing about it now is that I recognise it. and I don't like it. I understand where I'm coming from. So there's a lot of people like that who have lost loved ones, and I'll give you an example of that. Every year I go to it's a memorial service in East Belfast,
Yeah.
where two men were shot dead during a gun battle, and the two men were shot dead from St Matthew's Catholic Church,
Mhm.
and this is all in this is even in the Republican brochure and all that was put out. This
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
happened, and I see that the mother and the wife of that man was shot dead, and her son Billy and the daughter, and their hurt, their heartache, their sadness is every bit as raw now as it was 50 years ago,
Yeah.
1970.
Mhm.
That this man was shot dead. June, I remember. I was walking in the Orange Order in the Shank Road at the time, and there was riots all over Belfast, and there was a gun battle here. But I think to myself, if you think of those people and all their hurt, and they'll always be victims,
Yeah, yeah.
always be victims. But you get the thousands that came since that.
Mm.
There's still that. The other thing, that one of the biggest difficulties, I'm not quite sure how I would get over this. There are two difficulties. The first one is that in terms of social housing,
Mm.
housing estates, that Northern Ireland, if you look at the housing estates right across Northern Ireland, still over 90% either predominantly Protestant,
Yeah.
predominantly Catholic. So even if you go to Cathedral Quarter on a Saturday night, you're coming back into that,
Yeah.
you know, one community, predominantly unionist,
Yeah,
predominantly
yeah.
nationalist, or whatever. So for me, unless we deal with that, unless we deal with, I believe in integrated education.
Mhm.
I don't believe in forcing on people. I
Yeah.
believe in it,
Okay.
but the people who would be opposed to it would be the churches, both Catholic
Yeah.
and Protestant,
Yeah.
because they have a control of the situation. So unless we get to a point where people like me, growing up, never meet a Catholic until
Uh-huh.
you meet a woman who's come to read your fortune and,
Yeah.
and they read your tea leaves in a cup, we're still going to have that difficulty without a doubt.
Yeah. And what about the centenary of Northern Ireland? By the way, this is a very casual conversation. Are you okay for time?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But 10 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll try to be brief, just because there's one other question I want to ask you
Okay.
after that. So I'm just checking if it's still on. So the centenary of Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
How's that for you?
Well, I'm part of a group that's actually looking how to promote Northern Ireland
Mhm.
during that centenary. I think the danger is it becomes triumphalist on one side,
Yeah.
or it becomes, as some Republicans have said recently, what is there to celebrate?
Yeah.
Not very magnanimous. And of course we've had problems, right through 100 years. But as a senior Republican said to me a couple of months ago, he said, if you think of the progress that we've made in the last 30 years,
Mhm.
as an example,
Mhm.
so it's not all about doom and
Yeah.
gloom. So I think we need to celebrate what's good and wonderful about Northern Ireland. If you think of the people, even the people that over this past 100 years, and I'm thinking of even things like in football terms, George Best, with all his weaknesses. Pelly said he was the greatest footballer in the world, and I certainly would believe that. I have a book in my card at the moment looking at C.S. Lewis,
Yeah.
wonderful,
Yeah.
loved throughout the world.
Yeah.
Professor Pandridge, who was involved in the cardiac.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are one of the things to celebrate is that we have been the world forefront of how we deal with people who get kneecapped.
Yeah.
As an
Yeah.
example,
Yeah. Yeah.
just an example. And if you look at, I was going to say the Titanic, it was a great ship. We all say it was a great ship when it left Belfast, left East Belfast. But the Harn and Wolff Belfast shipyard built over 1,000 ships
Yeah.
and involved in wars and
Yeah.
with the British military and navy and all
Yeah.
that. With so much to be proud of.
Yeah.
so many good things on both on both communities. And for me, it's trying to get those aspects of what can bring us together. We can celebrate together without saying we won, you lost.
No, it's the whole thing for, you know, when Maskey, Alec Maskey would come off and say, you know, it was the biggest sectarian of the stately, but okay, that's the way you see it, but again, for me, it was, the great inventors, the great industrialists, the great scientists, the great sportsmen, the makers of culture, Van Morrison, so on, as you said, C.S. Lewis, you know, and Louis MacNeice. So I think there's just so much to look at. As Philip Orr said, you know, loyalists keep talking about losing our identity or being chipped away. He would sort of say, you may be right in some ways, but also just remember there's actually a whole culture to be rediscovered and brought out. Just something, it's sort of the forefront of my mind, just as we are in the decade of centenaries. I'm just sort of thinking out loud, and I want to get your take on this. We'll have to, because of time, we'll have to finish on this. But you know, I'm Irish, you're Irish. I'm just looking down south, and in the context of keep hearing from all quarters, we need a new agreed Ireland. I don't understand how. If we have set up here where everyone has to be through the prism of cross community funding, you know, balance both sides. If you go to the Ulster Museum, it's the Irish Proclamation and the Ulster Covenant. Whereas, so by and large, even if you don't agree with it, each community is aware of the other community. Whereas what I'm starting to realise, I'm suspect, may not be right, but from my experiences down south is, and what this podcast is trying to do, humanise unionists, is, you know, if you look at the GAA up north, it's got cross community initiatives. Down south, it has museums, initiatives, programs, and learning that is looking at the British solely as the black and tans and the violence, and maybe with a wee bit about the Queen thrown in. Then you look at what Michael D. Higgins, the president, was saying. If you look at the president of the Royal Hibernian Academy, you know, while Colin Davison is doing something, it's looking at all victims. You don't even know who they are. He's just looking at stuff that happened in the 1880s with land expulsions. So this has just come to the forefront of my mind when we're talking about Northern Ireland, the problems it has, but it feels like as someone who knows Mary McAleese, who's done a lot of work down south and gone down south, do you have any comment on that? Just maybe what of the lack of work and preparation that's going on down south in terms of.
Well, a couple of points there. First of all, you asked me about an agreed Ireland. We have an agreed Ireland. It's called the Good Friday Agreement, which you all signed up to. International agreement. Secondly, if you look at the history, I know you mentioned there about some people saying about this failed sectarian state. The Republic of Ireland was a very sectarian state, and even Republicans and nationalists would agree. If you think the demise of the Protestant population was the last 100 years, but there's no doubt about it. I think if you look back at the last couple of centenaries that we had, Republican and Loyalist, they went off very well. And to be fair to the Irish government, they would have supported both.
What do you mean exactly? About 1916 stuff?
I thought that went off well. The 2000 and 2012 one as well. So I think we can learn from that. I think if you think of Her Majesty the Queen when she went to Dublin, I attended one of the events that she was at. Absolutely amazing. That in that sense she brought reconciliation after hundreds of years of division. But interesting enough, 90%, maybe 95% of the population welcomed her with open arms, except Sinn Féin. They refused to recognise. I think it made a huge blunder at the time. even the Sinn Féin Lord Mayor of Cork, I think it was, who actually died about a year or so after, I think. He actually went to one
Yeah.
and he said that he was willing to support that. But I think there's a great opportunity now for the Irish government to be trying to look at both sides, and that they have set up a group
Yeah.
to look at the centenary to make sure that it's not just, you know, from a Republican
Yeah.
perspective, but from both sides. If you think of the former Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar,
Yeah.
he was in the Orange Museum,
Yeah.
Schumberg House
Yeah.
in East Belfast, and the Secretary of the Grand Lodge of Ireland, who's also my minister, Presbyterian minister,
Yeah.
Mervyn Gibson, said that his special advisor was saying, look, Taoiseach, you need to come here. You've spent an extra half an hour because he wanted to.
Yeah.
Interested in the history of the thing
Yeah,
as well, as you say. So those are good examples of how we can learn from one another. And it's not, I've been involved with groups from time to time before this pandemic, and I'd have taken to a Republican museum in West Belfast.
Yeah.
And one of the things they have is all about republicanism, but loyalism, and about loyalist paramilitaries now as well.
I think I'm just a wee bit worried that, you know, for every person down south who knows about the Irish Proclamation and Bloody Sunday and the hunger strikes in Cork and the Black and Tans, I don't think many understand actually the Ulster Covenant. You know, yesterday was Ulster Day.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's just sort of, I'm just sort of flagging some of the concerns I might
but
have.
Brian, could I just say,
Yeah.
I met two guys about 4 weeks ago. I was actually in Dublin,
Yeah.
and it was a political thing, and there was two guys. One of them was quite political, from, I suppose, from a socialist sort of a lovely guy. Two guys, and a number of people from the loyalist and unionist community were there. And this guy got up and he said, you know something, he said, I'm going to be honest with you. He said, I'm involved in politics. He said, I don't know one person in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
And I thought, now if he's like that,
Yeah.
what about the rest? I would say probably the majority of people in the Republic of Ireland, A, have probably never been across the border, but B,
Yeah.
they wouldn't know anybody, you know.
Yeah. So I think, well, again, that's what this podcast is hopefully going to try to do. So it's just you've got to, I suppose, if I'm not saying I'm willing it on, but you know, for all this talk of a new Ireland and whatnot, there's not much preparatory work maybe explaining these people that you want to welcome in. So it's something I'm going to look at a wee bit more and hopefully have further conversations about. So unless you have anything final to say, we'll leave it at that for today.
I'll just say finally, thanks very much, Brian. I think this is a great opportunity for people to get to know people like myself and others. And there are many people like me and within the unionist Protestant community. But it's interesting because I was a member of the Assembly for 6 years, and although we fought the peace out in the chamber between nationalists and Republicans, when we sat down in the committees, where there was Sinn Féin, you had been with Sinn Féin, the SDLP, Jim Allister, and we worked together because you had to get things done. And one of the things I've found over the years is that you see, when you work together with people, you build up a relationship, and at times you build up a sense of trust. And I've been involved in interface stuff for quite a number of years, and people who I'd have seen as my enemies, once you sit down and work with them to ensure that the violence stops on the interfaces between Protestant and Catholics, to ensure that you're working together in different programs, you build up a relationship, and at times a friendship with people who would have been your enemies. And I'm not saying that for everybody, but I've certainly, and I never thought I'd say it, but I have people from the Republican nationalist community that I would not only would be friends, but I would trust them.
That's very positive. I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this with you, because I think you like, I know plenty unionists like you, but you certainly break the mold of the DUP politician because you're very easygoing, you're very amicable and jokey and serious and knowledgeable, and you're you're a loyalist, but you're incredibly multi-layered, and we need people to know that, and not this sort of like Paisley-eyed type dogmatic nutter. So I'll grab your portrait, and then I'll just let people see that.
That's good then.
And then I haven't turned it off just yet, so people can see this. I was going to do the podcast where I'd be chatting to the person drawing them, but it's just too much.
You should have painted my hair black.
Was that what it used to be?
Or black used to be.
So there you go.
That's good. Thank you so much. That's very kind of you.
There.